Hi, my name is Renee Wilson, and I'm in Communications 522. My research topic is on the appraisal theory. The appraisal theory states and teaches that emotions are elicited based on our thoughts or perceptions pertaining to a certain situation, a certain experience, or things that we may have gone through in the past. And as we are experiencing those things, whatever our situations or circumstances are, we then in turn form an emotional response to that. For instance, if every time I go into a school building, I get a negative feeling because when I was a child, I had a teacher that told me I wouldn't amount to anything. And now when I go into a school building, I have a negative feeling. My appraisal is that I, as a child, was told something negative in the schoolhouse. And so now, when I go in the schoolhouse, I don't have a good feeling. Or it could be the opposite. I could have been told that as a child by a teacher that I would never amount to anything. And so now I decide that I look at the situation that I went through and decide I'm going to become a teacher and make it a positive experience. So our experiences elicit some sort of emotional response. They could be negative or they could be positive. Also, with the appraisal theory, I may experience the same situation. I go into a school building. As a child, I'm told that I can't do, I'm not going to amount to anything by a teacher. But now I have a child that's in school, and so I go into the school building and I have a negative feeling, but I go in and my son or my daughter has a wonderful teacher. The experience becomes very positive. But then maybe my next child that goes into the same school building may have a different teacher that has a very negative outlook. And so now I don't have such positive appraisals about the schoolhouse. So now my feelings about going into the schoolhouse are different. And so the same situations could elicit different emotional responses. And so that is what the appraisal theory talks about. There are two major models of the appraisal theory. One of them is the structural model, and that is where they look at the way that the actual emotions that are elicited from the situations that occurred. Um, they look at the relationship between the two, the actual appraisal and the emotions that occur. So it identifies those emotions and they look at them from a thought process, from a relationship process, and from a motivational process. How do how do they relate to one another? What are your thoughts about it, and what does it motivate you to think, to feel about it? Then there's the process appraisal model, which is the second of the two approaches. It is where you look at all of the activities surrounding the thoughts from which the appraisal is formed. Um, and then it looks at the activity, all of that. It's basically the mechanics of how did you get to the thought process that led to the emotion as a result of the situation. And there are two ways: they are associative and reasoning. And both of these are uh, the major models, and then from there stem several submodels or lower level models, for lack of a better word. Then with the appraisal theory, which has been quite interesting, is the fact that they're using it with robotics technology. They are providing a stimulus for a robot to think about or process through its computer, and from there, once the robot processes it, the robot decides based on a preset type of, they say emotion, but I'm kind of torn about this study here because they're eliciting manufactured emotions for a robot to feel as if they were human. And from a biblical Christian standpoint, the only person that has the ability to create life or create that type of dynamic is God Himself. So that was a very interesting study to see that now we've come so far in technology that now we are manufacturing emotions in technology so that they can behave and act and respond as if they are human. Another study that was very interesting and I found to be very helpful was the mindfulness approach of how they use mindfulness. They use stimulus and emotion to, um, and then with meditation, in order to, they take your situation that you've been in, let's say it's a negative situation or a stressful situation, they take that situation, they teach you how to think about it by using meditation to begin to create the thought pattern that elicits the emotions that they are looking to elicit. So, in other words, if you're stressed about going to work, they take your situation at work and teach you how to change your thought process about the stress related incidents at work. And then from there, over time, your emotions will begin to change to a more positive, more conducive to a better work environment. They're using it with conflict resolution. There were several studies on that, and it's interesting because they're working more so from the structural point. They're looking, or the process point rather. They're looking at the mechanics behind how you're thinking and how it forms the emotions. And another one that was quite interesting was texting. With modern technology, electronics is a major form of communication today, so that's a wide open field for the appraisal model. They're using, there's a study right now where they're looking at emoticons to verify how emotions are being transmitted through electronic devices. And this is an emerging field, and because the jury's still out definitively on the impact of electronics and technology on our communication process and our emotional states and our spiritual states, the jury's still out. But I think that they're beginning to find that we cannot really effectively transmit emotions through technology. There'll be a lack or a gap somewhere. And these are just three of a few of the studies that are being conducted right now. Another one that was interesting was politics, is they provide the politician with certain things to say, and they look at the response of their constituents or the people who are viewing their speeches and see what kind of emotions are elicited so that they can teach the politician how to say something or how not to say something to elicit the emotional response that they're looking for. So, in conclusion, uh, just to sum it up in a Christian worldview, the Bible says in Philippians 4:8 that we are to think on those things that are of good report and to think on those things that are right and that are pure and that are noble. And so, one of the things that the Bible also says is that a man is as he thinketh in his heart. And so, if we want to elicit positive responses, we have to think on those things that are good that God says. And so we can make sure that our appraisals are positive by thinking on those things that God told us to think on. And this has been quite interesting. I've learned quite a bit about myself that will help me in just applying what God's telling us in a secular way, and a secular way of saying what God's been saying to us all along. Think on those things are good. So I hope this gives you a decent overview of the appraisal theory. God bless everybody, and I wish you well in your in the rest of the class.